dragon on high crossguard.
Perhaps we haven't met. I'm Discord.
Another chaotic battle!
Taste the scream of death.
Greetings, comrades. This is 88 Gelu here with another chaotic tutorial. So, this time I'll be going over board formats and also how movement on the board works, as well as just what the placemats look like and all that fun stuff. I also have two other abilities that I forgot to show you guys. So right over here, well, you could see the brainwash text thing in unique, which is old news for you guys if you had watched the previous video. But here, we also have exhaust all disciplines 5. Now, exhaust is an ability I didn't go over, which is if a creature has exhaust, every turn after it attacks, it loses a certain number in a discipline based on its exhaust. So this is not the same as recklessness. Recklessness applies only to energy. This applies only to disciplines, which are these 4 things here. So since this gives exhaust all disciplines 5, that means that the creature who has it loses 5 courage, power, wisdom, and speed after they attack each turn. If they instead had like exhaust power 10, then after they attacked every turn they would lose 10 power. Now that that's explained, we'll go on to this other one, defender. So defender means that, in fact, it's useful to use the battle board for this. So let's say that this guy has this, which gives him defender. Some creatures also have defender by themselves, but I couldn't find them immediately. So what that means is, if a creature, if like, let's say this creature were to attack this creature, and he had defender, then he could intercept the attack. They switch positions, and instead now this creature is fighting this creature. Now the thing is, defender isn't always that simple, because like it says right here, defender flood morpher, sometimes it's very specific. Most creatures don't just have defender, which means that they can defend anybody. For example, this allows you only to defend flood morphers, which, as I showed you last video, means creatures with the type flood morpher. You could also have like defender of a certain element, defender of a certain tribe, or defender against a certain thing. Like there is a battle gear which gives you defender against range. So if your opponent has range, you can use defender. So I hope that made sense. But now that I mentioned that, I will go over the other 2 battle board-esque abilities that I mentioned last time, which is range and swift. So the combat step is thus. Fortunately, there's a handy little guide on the side of each of the playmats, which are your setup, where you place each of your creatures, each one of them equipped to 1 battle gear. And then if you're playing the regular mode of the game and not the basic mode, you would also pick 1 Mugic for each creature you have. So I have 3, so I also have 3 battle gear and 3 Mugics. Then you would place your location deck here, and your attack deck there. And the number of attack and location cards are also based on the number of creatures you have, but it's not the same number. It basically goes something like, if it's a 1v1 or 3v3, then you have 5 locations and 10 attacks. If it's a 6v6 or a 10v10, then you have 20 attacks and 10 locations. And then the system and goes on from there with every pair. And each one of them is arranged on these chaotic tile things. Whatever, that's not important. But then on your turn, you can move your creature. So let's say on my turn, I want to move this guy here. I could do that. You can move each one of your creatures one space unless they have Swift. If you move a creature into an opponent creature space, like if you were to do that, you fight that creature. You can only have one battle per round. So after the end of that combat, whoever wins, like let's say he beat him, this guy goes to the discard pile, and then my creature will move into my opponent's creature's space. You can only move if it's your turn, so you can't have your creatures be moving around the battlefield on your opponent's turn, and vice versa. So yeah, you can only move each creature one space per turn. So if I wanted, I can move like all my guys here for no exact reason. But if a creature has Swift, like let's say for example, this guy has Swift 1. The number of Swifts means how many extra moves you have. So if you have Swift 1, I can move 2 spaces. If I have Swift 2, I can move 3 spaces. Because it's 1 for my basic movement, and then an additional 1 for each number in Swift. I'm really hoping this makes sense. Now what range does is range allows you to attack anybody on the board as long as you can get to them. So range is useless if you don't have Swift, which is why all creatures that have range also at least have Swift 1. So if this guy had range and Swift 1, he could attack this guy, even though he'd be jumping over this whole row. Or if he had Swift 2, he could attack this, he could attack my brain. He could attack this guy, and so on. This is also, as you might notice, the format of a 3v3 battle. So now that I've explained range, defender, swift, and exhaust, let's go to the other sections. So, in combat, each of you will have to arrange your stats and energy, which is why there's a giant bar right here. Energy, courage, power, wisdom, speed. It's important to keep tabs on your creature's current ones because many attacks will either, or abilities will either increase or decrease stats, and of course your energy will constantly be changing because you're getting attacked. At the end of combat, and after you move your creatures, then it will be your opponent's turn. At the beginning of your turn, at the beginning of combat, the person whose turn it is will flip up their top location card, and that will be the location you guys are fighting on, which leads to what I said before when we were talking about locations, about initiative and location abilities. Now also, if your creature is destroyed, like let's say this guy was defeated, his battle gear is also destroyed, so they both go to the discard pile. Likewise, also if you use a Mugic, which we still haven't really gone over, it will also go to the discard pile because you can't use it more than once, unless a creature's ability says otherwise, but there are always those kinds of exceptions. You also might notice here that this is a 6v6 format playmat. So at most you could do 6v6, while this one is a 10v10. That's because this is an old one, and the older battle boards are the best battle boards. But that's a completely different point, and ignore that. Now, any time during a turn, whether it's the beginning of a turn, beginning of combat, after combat, or when creatures are moving, you can activate activated abilities like expend, paying Mugic counters, or playing Mugic, as long as it doesn't say otherwise, like while unengaged or while engaged or something like that. Engaged, by the way, refers to whether or not you're in combat. So if you're unengaged, you're not in combat. If you are engaged, you are in combat. And basically what happens afterwards is, let's say, for example, Partsoa was going to use his ability to remove 2 of his Mugic counters to make an opponent's creature lose 20 in all disciplines. And let's say he was going to do it on this guy. Now, this guy's ability allows him to expend water to gain a Mugic counter. So let's say in response to Partsoa doing that, he used his ability to gain a Mugic counter and then played a Mugic like, I don't know, this one. That is what is called a chain. Very similar to what it is in Yu-Gi-Oh! In fact, it's exactly the same to what it is in Yu-Gi-Oh! Where if there's one activated ability after another, then it stands by whichever one goes last is responded to first. Now, this sounds really confusing, but basically what it means is if what I just said happened, then this Mugic's ability would be activated before this guy's ability is, because he used it last and used it in response to him using his ability. This is very complicated. It took me a very long time to get this. So I hope that this is clear. If it's not, then maybe if you watch some of my chaotic matches, it may become a bit more clear. Hopefully. Now also, there are the attributes of location and Mugic abilities. Like Battle Gear and creatures, locations have either their own abilities or have a well-known ability. Like some locations could have creatures in this location gain element 5 of a certain element. And other creatures and creatures who don't have that element gain exhaust courage 10 or something like that. But Mugics are very different because each Mugic has a unique ability. Some Mugics will do things like give you attributes, like give you an element type, or give you element 5, or give you outperform wisdom 5, or something like that. But many of them have very unique abilities, and which makes it hard unless you actually know the game well. So basically what you would have to do is you would have to just look through your Mugics when making a deck and find ones that corresponded well, even though it's a lot harder to find good Mugics for a deck than it is to find cooperating creatures and battle gear. Because of this whole chain of effects and also the complexity of Mugics is why there is both a basic and a normal version of the game, because basic does not include Mugic in it. Now, most of the time when you use a Mugic, it costs a certain number of Mugic counters. Like right here, this one costs 1 Mugic counter. and all the Mugic counters have to come from one source. So let's say I was going to cast this one Mugic counter card from him. I can't do that because he doesn't have any Mugic counters, but I could cast it from Lord Von Blute because he has 2. But if I get a Mugic that costed, let's say, 2 Mugic counters, and this guy had 1, I couldn't pay 1 Mugic counter with him and 1 with him. They both have to come from the same source when casting a Mugic. I really hope that this is clear to you. If there is anything that you guys don't understand, please put it in the comments and I will do my best to try and explain it. Now, as I also previously explained, there are Mugics which can only be cast by certain tribes. I'm trying to think of what else I may not have explained about Mugic. Oh yes, there is Negating. There are both Mugics and activated abilities, or even battle gear sometimes, which have abilities that allow you to what is called negating either an ability or a Mugic. Now, if you haven't played any other card game, this would be a very new concept. However, if you don't, you probably know what I'm talking about. So, in case you don't, when you're negating it, you're making it so that it's as if it doesn't exist. It's as if it didn't happen. So let's say this guy casted a Mugic, and this guy negated it with another Mugic. It's like he never played that Mugic. Both Mugics are sent to the discard pile, and they both still used up their Mugic counters, but the effects of his Mugic never happened. Same with if you were to negate an ability. Let's say he were to use a Mugic to negate Partsoa's ability, which is, as demonstrated before. Then that means that for that turn, Partsoa cannot use his ability. Most effects, unless they say something like for the entire game or destroy etc. thing, unless something is being sent to the discard pile or being removed from the game or otherwise tells you that this effect is going to be permanent, then at the beginning of the next turn, it is the effects are removed. So let's say he were to use... So back to the example of him negating Lord Von Blute's Mugic. Because both Mugics are being played, even though one's negated, they still both go to the discard pile, so you're not going to get those back. But let's say Partsoa used his ability to make Blades lose 20 in all disciplines. At the beginning of the next turn, Blades is going to have all of his disciplines back to its default again. Same with when this guy uses his expend, he only is eliminating his water for that turn. When it's the next player's turn, by the way, when I say turn, I'm not saying like turn order. I'm saying when one person has finished their entire set of moves, meaning their movement, combat, and end step. Because also there is a turn order with attacks. One player uses an attack card, then the other one does, but your stats are not refreshed at the end of those turns. Only at the end, only after a player officially ends their turn, and it's the next player's turn to assign combat, etc., etc. The problem... I don't know what I was about to say. Anyway. So I hope this explains a lot. I hope this wasn't too long. Once again, if you have any questions or suggestions, or also have noticed an ability that I forgot to mention, put it in the comments. I'll do my best to respond to it. So yeah, guys, thanks again for watching. Goodbye.